So I've been writing again. I'm writing another book, and sales. We're all in sales. In fact, the definition of sales is the transference of confidence. So the new book is called Presence, Impact, and Influence. How memorable are you? How powerful are you? How do you stand out in a crowded marketplace? How do you read verbals, nonverbals? How do you become more memorable in everything that you do? That is probably the number one skill most people need to work on right now. And as I'm reading, I hit books like Communicate to Influence, Power Cues. What a great book. The 3 Laws of Performance. And all of these books involve, well, probably your ability to lead change. And I think right now we're in January 2021. Everybody's come through the Christmas and we're like, okay, everybody had great holidays and Happy New Year to all of you. But now January hits and you're thinking to yourself, how do I stand out? What is it that I can do that's different? And tonight for the Business Adversity and Innovation Series, I couldn't think of a better person. If anyone is from the city of Hamilton, Ontario, and you're looking at who's on the screen with you, you're like, oh my God, it's Krysta Boyer. And I remember the very first time I met Krysta Boyer. We were at a huge event. There were hundreds of people, and this incredible individual comes walking through the crowd, walks right up to me and says, hey, I'm Krysta. I'm gonna be the next mayor of Hamilton. And I'm like, what? This is exactly what I'm gonna do. This is when I'm gonna do it. This is why I'm gonna do it. And I go, Krysta, like, what's your background? Like, what do you do? Krysta Boyer, in front of us now, is a commercial realtor. She's out of Ancaster, and her firm is called Blair, Blanchard, Stapleton Limited. And if you know Krysta not just from commercial real estate, residential real estate, or the real estate world. You know Krysta from the work that she does with Hamilton, the business in Hamilton, the young entrepreneurial professionals out of the Hamilton Chamber. And Krysta sits on committees. But this person is a powerhouse. And I wanted you all to meet Krysta. And she's accepted to join us tonight. And I know her schedule is pretty busy. So Krysta, welcome to our group. This is going to be a lot of fun. I suspect we'll have a little bit of energy tonight. But introduce yourself. Like, who are you? Who are you?
Well, firstly, thank you, Neil, for having me. Great introduction. I love your energy. I'm very excited and feel quite privileged to be joining you this evening. Love the series you're working on as well. A bit about myself. Yes, I'm a commercial realtor in Hamilton, and I am with Blair, Blanchard, Stapleton, which is a Hamilton born and raised commercial brokerage, really great group of individuals. Yeah. And aside from that, very passionate about my community, like you said, sitting on boards and committees, yeah. And even implementing my own initiatives over the years. So I'm very involved in that as well.
And of all the young leaders in Hamilton that I've ever met, and it's not even about being young, to me, it's about passion, it's about power, it's about commitment. You've never been afraid. As long as I've ever known you, you're the one that always reminds me of a quote that I had when I started my business. And I have it around here today. It says, do just once what others say you cannot do, and you will never listen to their limitations again. That was James R. Cook that gave that quote. And it always reminded me of you, because you've been able to drive change, innovation. You've overstepped any kind of political red tape, and you've just made things happen. If any of you know what's happening with downtown Hamilton, James Street, you transformed that whole Westinghouse project. So you've been busy. You've been doing a lot of things. What was last year like for you, Krysta? Obviously, 2020 is a bit of a crazy show, but what happened with you? Like, what happened with commercial real estate in your business?
And before we get to that, I just want to touch on a comment that you said in regards to my fearlessness. And truth be told, I am afraid. And what I'm most afraid of in life is not pursuing my passions or my goals. That's kind of a mantra that I have in life. So in regards to last year, 2020, what an interesting and challenging year for all of us. Everyone. I know entering into the year, I was brazenly saying 2020, this is going to be the year of clear vision, you know, so much optimism for the year as far as my own endeavor, right? And the endeavors of everyone around me, you know, coming out of 2019, ending on a good note and seeing how that was continuing on in 2020 until, of course, the pandemic hit,
Right.
you know, and here we are today. And when it hit and we experienced our first shutdown in March, it hit with such great force in my business.
Yeah.
And reason being, so in 2019, I had elected to make retail my focus. That's leasing, buying, selling, right? So that was my focus. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, the businesses that were the most affected were the hospitality and retail sector.
Even still today.
Because of that, and still today. And because of it, my business took a direct hit. I literally had many deals start falling apart that I was in the middle of because the confidence wasn't there, and understandably so, from the clients or tenants I was working with. So people started bowing out and taking a step back.
So it was a challenge.
And then
2020 was a challenge.
It was an incredible challenge. So for quite some time, I experienced a low in my business that I've never experienced. It went quiet. And at first it was difficult to live in the quietness because I was so used to going, right? But, you know, and you include the fact that it's a shutdown. I'm staying at home now. I'm respecting the COVID protocol.
Right.
And so it's taken in my social interactions, which, you know, is very highly engaged socially. You know, I like to network. I like to get out to social events. I like to see my friends and family socially. So all that, like so many others, was taken away. And then with my business just landing silent, it was challenging at first because I didn't know what to expect for the future as far as, you know, how is this going to affect my business overall? Am I going to be able to recover from this? And how long is this going to last?
Yeah.
So you know, I think a lot of us I entered into a heavy period of reflection and insight.
Yeah.
You know, and started questioning my career and the strategy and plan that I had put in place in regards to the retail sector.
Right.
So I got to a point where, after, you know, really not knowing what to do with myself and really not finding the answers, that I realized, well, you know, I'm in a position right now where I have all this time and I don't know what to do with it. You know, idle hands, right, are the devil's tools. So I best be making some type of use of my time. And what it quickly became was cooking and baking, which was actually a great experience. I was always so busy in work, social life, volunteer life, that I never, like, home cooked meals were not a thing. Baking never happened. That was a foreign idea. And, you know, it got to the point where I was trying out elaborate recipes and really getting into it, to the point where I was experimenting with my own recipes and could just, off the top of my head, whip together like a really great meal. And I was loving it, you know, the fact that I had the opportunity to develop this new skill and share it with others. Because you know, like the baking, right? You don't bake for yourself. Yeah, baking, you bake for others.
Yeah.
So I was, you know, dropping off baking at friends' houses and sending it to work with my partner, who's a firefighter, you know, fattening all the firefighters up, and having a great time. Still though, there was that looming aspect of my career and the lack of finances coming in, right?
Yeah.
And so I had to make a decision as far as what direction do I take during these times.
Wow. So
and
you did a big reinvention. And I go back to the timeline because, you know, I think this series isn't just Pollyanna and motivation. Like, there's some real stories here. We had recently a St. Catharines real estate team Jim and Patrick from McGar, the B team, and they were talking about, they went back to some of the things that they learned historically to kind of in the whole real estate world. And myself, I remember I gave myself about 2 weeks to kind of sit back and think about, okay, this probably isn't going away. I went back to what I learned back in 2008 in the last recession, and I looked at what was recession proof at that time and now what's pandemic proof now. And I've come to determine that your brand, how you stand out, the writing that you do. You picked up baking. I picked up the hobby of shoe shining. It was just the funniest thing in the world. But I couldn't stop. Like I couldn't stop. Like you and I are entrepreneurs, so our brains are always going. And I know a lot of people who watch these, have reinvented and pivoted, or they're doing it now. And there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of people that are uncertain. I've always turned to my mastermind. I remember talking with you and talking about the business and sharing with other people. A lot of people are trying to make this journey alone, are walking a lonely way right now. It's very, very difficult. But bringing together like-minded leaders, powerful thinkers, I think is one of the greatest things you can do. Krysta, how long did you kind of sit in this funk last year? And then when did you make the shift?
It was a long period. It basically carried itself into the summer. And then in the summer months, like you speak of support and, fellow people in the trenches with you. I had conversations with many people who knew me well and knew that I had a tendency to overwhelm myself and overload myself and had no work-life balance. And they started suggesting, why don't you just take advantage of this as an opportunity for the downtime you never were able to experience in past.
Wow.
And that really spoke to me because I had complete faith that I was going to enter right back where I was before, as far as being, incredibly busy in many aspects of my life. So I took advantage of it. In the summer, had surgery. So that was, I had the time to have my tonsils out, which was of great relief. And, attempting to book that in before was near impossible to get that time away from work. So right. I had the entire month of August off for surgery and to recover.
Yeah.
And in July, I really just spent as much time outdoors as possible, barbecuing, reading, taking care of myself. And then, it just, again, it became the question of, I heard in times like this, and I know so many people experience this, where you start to hear advice from others. And it's the question of what is the motivation behind the advice that I think is important to recognize, because what I was hearing from others was that you should enter into residential. Residential is such a strong market right now.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew fully I could enter into residential. I knew fully that I could make a great amount of money in residential. But I also knew this, my personal branding, which I had spent so many years building in establishing myself as a Hamilton commercial realtor,
right,
I'd run the risk of losing that.
Yeah, you put that at
and
risk.
It wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I wasn't willing to sacrifice that. And instead, I decided to double down. I doubled down on retail. I doubled down on my strategy.
Yeah.
I looked at ways where I can make tweaks. I looked at where I could, in regards to finance, get rid of any overhead that I now recognized was no longer necessary.
Yeah,
which was a great amount. Once I started digging, I couldn't believe the amount of overhead that I have that now I don't even miss. I can't even recall some of it unless I really tried.
Yeah.
And so I doubled down. I gave myself permission to have a break, and I forgave myself, because part of the problem with taking that break and having that long lull was that I started to feel guilty, like I had failed. So I forgave myself and committed to the fact that I deserve this time, and that, take it as almost, and also considering too, I have my health, my family's healthy, my friends are healthy. Financially in our household, we were fine throughout it all. So I had that to be grateful for, which also afforded me time.
I have to write that down. I forgave
You know,
myself.
yeah.
I love
And then,
I love saying to people, "Well, stop taking yourself so darn seriously. You can resign your position as general manager of the universe anytime you want. We just take ourselves so darn
yeah,
seriously all the time." And someone said to me this week is the pandemic has not necessarily been bad for everybody. It's not what happens to us that matters. It's how we react to it. And some people have seen this as a gift, a way to minimize the things in your life, reconnect with what's really important to you. And it sounds like that's what you did. What else were you going to say, Krysta?
well, actually, just further to your note there, you know, the reevaluation. I think it was, and I heard this from so many people, where everyone was taking pause. Well, they were forced into a position of pause to reevaluate their lives. And I found myself in a position where I was questioning so much about my career. It was, you know, after all the cooking and baking, I'm like, oh, maybe I get into hospitality because in, you know, another life I had experience in that. I'm like, maybe I do it. Maybe I open the restaurant. Then I was looking at, maybe I go back to school and get the psychology, finish my psych degree, right? Perhaps I do that. And, you know, perhaps I do this, maybe I move here, right? I just started going through all the things.
Yeah, over
And
here,
what
do
was great
this.
about it, yeah, yeah, I do this. And what was great about it was I kept coming back. I kept coming back to commercial real estate. I kept coming back to Hamilton. And it just helped me to see that even in this time, I knew this is fully where and what I wanted to be doing.
Wow. So what's happened since the summer? Like what's happened with your business?
Well, it's interesting. So, as you know, I obviously there was some planning on my part as far as, you know, a strategy for myself. Working with some of my clients, you know, we did make some changes in our strategy, in our leasing strategy, in order to cope with COVID and become, you know, real competitors in a very vacant market and a challenging market
Ah,
for businesses.
yeah.
And in September, we saw a reward of that in September. And since is September through December, I had the busiest season for my career that I've ever experienced. It was
Congratulations.
amazing.
Wow. So you've made, if you could look back and say, you know, what are 3 or 4 main distinctions that you made moving from your baking career? You always have a career in ping pong because you kicked my butt that one day in ping pong. But
Yeah.
so you looked at your different options and you were saying, you know, what are 3 or 4 things, Krista, that you did that brought you back to your strengths?
Um, you know, the first would be looking at what made me decide to make the decision to focus on retail and revisiting that decision and really asking myself whether it was something that was simply provoked by the pandemic or it was a bad plan. And in revisiting the plan, I knew it was a good plan. I knew it was the right move. And I knew that, like you said, how you said in 2008, you look back at the businesses that survived 2008. How did they survive it? Same thing. I started looking at what would make me successful in this plan throughout this experience. And then I made a move to work towards that. And I would say another means to my success was finding work-life balance. I never knew what that was like.
Yeah.
And I started revisiting, you know, like I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this because as the, you know, throughout this pandemic, our social circles have become like this, right? And as they started to narrow like that, with the few friends that I would in walks, me and my friends will go for walks together, with the very few friends that I went for walks with, our relationships developed further.
Mm.
It, you know, I had time to take a greater interest in their lives, and they were able to share their time with me. And that right there was a gift to my success because, you know, it lent to the why am I doing all this? You know, I'm doing this event so that I can have time for my friends, so that I can have time for my family.
Yes.
So that definitely played a role in it. And and I would say even in my personal relationship as well, right? Like
Yeah.
my poor boyfriend puts up with so much of an absence from me, right? Because I'm always prior to this going here, doing this, seeing this person, hosting this event, doing this deal. This is
I'm
what's
with you.
happening.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And now, yeah. And now I work from home. So we, on days when he's off, we can have lunch together. We have breakfast together, we have lunch together. We go for walks during the day now. So it's really done a favor to me as far as that relationship as well.
Wow. If there's one piece of advice, which is the big part of this whole video series, if there's one piece of advice you would give somebody who may not necessarily even be in commercial real estate, but someone in a young business professional, like, what would you say? What would you tell them?
The conversation when pandemic first hit was, I found, centered around pivoting. And I don't know that that's necessarily what is needed in your business, right? Like I found, and I explored that as well. Where's my pivot? How do I pivot? Right. And I was looking for what are the major changes I need to make in my business. And what I ended up discovering was that really I only need to make minor changes in order to maintain the strategy I'd already implemented. So I would say that's one thing for people to take, some pause on, to ask themselves, do I need to make a huge pivot? Or do I need to just re-examine my business and look at opportunities for minor changes instead? Is this a good plan that is only being disrupted in part because of the pandemic? And, then how do I take care of that pandemic section without totally doing a turnabout, right? Which could be successful, couldn't be successful, but where are you presently with your business?
Yeah.
And like avoiding those knee-jerk reactions without really looking, thinking this through.
Yeah.
And um, I would say, again, going back to my point about advice, being cautious about the advice you receive from others as well, understanding their motivations. Is it driven by anxiety? Is it driven by, their need or want for you to be successful?
Yeah.
Are these individuals who understand your business? I've learned that over the years, to be cautious of advice from others who do not understand the nuances of commercial real estate. Because if you're
Yeah.
not in it, then how would you have the experience to offer me advice? And it's not to say that I couldn't receive good advice from someone outside of my field, but it is something of a cautionary tale as far as who is offering me this advice.
Yeah.
And not to feel, you know, um, as if you're doing anything wrong by, not accepting the advice. No shame in that. No shame in taking your own advice,
They mean well.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? And acknowledge it, be grateful for it, but at the same time, evaluate it and its
Yeah.
worth to you.
It's amazing to me in these
And I
videos.
would say,
Yeah. Go ahead, Krysta.
oh, go ahead, go ahead. I'd love to hear this.
No, you go first.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say is, one thing that really works for me in life and in business is recognizing my circumstances, my circumstances and my fortunes in life.
Yeah.
Being grateful for that which I have, identifying those things, yeah, asking yourself, are you healthy? Are you financially stable? Are you housed? Are you fed? Are you supported? Are you loved? And then, looking at that base and foundation you have in your life, and then building upon it, allowing that to be a resource for you in order to become successful.
Yeah.
So I would say that is a necessary tool. And taking time regularly to literally write it down. What am I grateful for? What do I have to be thankful for? Then accomplishments, like and Neil, you know this, we so quickly forget the accomplishments we make in a day, in a year, right? And something that I practice regularly, and not just at New Year's, once a month,
Yeah.
I sit down and I look back at my accomplishments, and it serves, and I surprise myself every time I do. because so easily I forget things or I dismiss things as not being an accomplishment. And it helps me maintain motivation, and it helps me maintain goals, and it helps me recognize that, I am doing well. I am being productive. I am attempting to move forward. I am getting things done.
Yeah. And Krista, the one thing I appreciate about you that's new in this series is you've kind of taken a look back at, backwards at the accomplishments that you've made. We all take these for granted, right? There's things that we do, and we're so focused on what's next and what's really important. And the thing that you always talk about, it's an amazing theme that keeps popping up in these videos. And this is not by design. These videos are all like one take. But if someone said to me, last year, was there like a book that really impacted me? And it really speaks to what you were saying is, and I keep showing this in all these videos, but really this is powerful. It's called The Infinite Game. And it's written by Simon Sinek. And this book is all about perspective. This pandemic, this isn't the first time this has happened to us. It will not be the last time. Yeah, it's pretty severe, but really it's the people who keep their perspective on the bigger vision, the bigger, not just 2021, but the next 3 years. This is what I want to really create for my business. But what I appreciate about what you're sharing is also look back at some of the accomplishments that you've had. I'm with you. In 2020, I was writing. I put my head down. I really, really started to focus on invention, and I've never been busier now than I've ever been. It's a different format where everything's online. This is all virtual now. Teaching now is all virtual. You and I are working at Master University. We're doing all that virtually. That's our new reality. So it's our ability to accept it. What do you see for 2021? Like, is there any projections that you have? Like, what are you looking forward to?
I'll tell you honestly, I'm looking forward to giving my parents a hug. And it's interesting how it's the simple things in life that a lot of people have now found new focus on, right? And I hate to sound pessimistic, but I have cautious confidence in 2021.
Yeah.
I do feel that we're in it for quite some time. I would be, I believe maybe it's Christmas where we might see some form of normalcy. I don't know if that would be the case. So I have mentally prepared myself, for the next year to be pretty much a reflection of what it was last year, and if I am proven wrong, by God, that would be the best time to be wrong in my life.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm looking forward to this being over. I really feel for the businesses because, like, obviously, I deal with a lot of small businesses, and there's so many businesses that are either struggling, have shut down, and it's so disheartening to see. Like, again, like you and I are entrepreneurs, we have a lot of relationships with small businesses, and we know the amount of work and effort that goes into creating, establishing, managing, and operating a small business. And to see something like this come in and just start wiping out businesses it's really, really sad.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful for the businesses. I'm hopeful that we'll see a bit of a resurgence as well after we get past this. And I'm really hopeful and looking forward to getting back out into the real world again and seeing everyone.
Yeah. And I'm totally with you. I always know I can rely on you. We're like a great team. We're always communicating with each other. And to me, that's what keeps me going. It's tough because we're alone. Like we're in our offices and people are Zoom fatigued. Everybody's facing that right now. But there's no 9 to 5 anymore. There's not, as an entrepreneur, there's never been 9 to 5. But the people who are used to that environment, they're reinventing like everybody else. So I think it really comes back down to perspective, looking at, kind of some of your past successes, taking inventory of that, count your blessings, a classic Dale Carnegie principle, but also, do some self-reflection. And I always tell people, what are you reading right now? Like, that's a great way of staying fresh and keep your brand going. So I'm always impressed with how you keep your brand moving. So on behalf of everybody and myself, I want to thank you for taking time on a Thursday night to kind of share with us, number one, your story, and what you represent in Hamilton. I suspect there's going to be a ton of people. Wow, I know Krysta. And most people have seen you and they know what you do, but I'm hoping that this video gives them a different perspective of you, and you're a powerful person. And of course, I wish you all the very best. If there's anybody I'm going to turn to for motivation in 2021, it'll be you. And you're always good at kicking butt and taking names. That's really what I'm saying. So keep your head down.
Well, what's the alternative?
Thanks so much for working with us. It's a lot of fun doing these. I learn a lot from these. I just took a page of notes. You bugger, I took a page of notes. I hope some other people will take a page of notes, maybe 2 or 3 pages of notes. So thank you, Krysta.
Yes, thank you for having me. And again, thank you for doing this. These are great.
All right, keep it real out there, okay?